All right, everybody, welcome back to another class. This time we're joined for a second time by Professor Barbara Burgess-Lefebvre. And we first met around TEAAS, which is the Themed Entertainment and Attractions Academic Society. And we both attended the symposium that TEAAS had in 2021, and but we didn't actually get to connect there because I had to leave early, so we had to connect later and talk about a few things. And this last year, Professor Lefebvre actually presented our poster about our Disney classes at the 2022 version of the symposium. So thank you very much for doing that. And I wanted to have her back to talk about a recap of that symposium, some of the fun things that they talked about there, and also talk about IAAPA, what IAAPA is, her experience of IAAPA, because she spent a few days walking around the conference this year, and then get into some other parks and themed entertainment related content and questions. So welcome back. And just for that quick recap for everybody, can you give a quick recap of what your connection is with Disney, what you do at the university and with Disney musicals?
Okay, so my connection with Disney starts in 1972, the year after the parks in Florida opened, when my parents took us down for a trip. We would have gone in 71, but they couldn't get rooms at the Contemporary, so we put it off a year. I visited pretty regularly as an adult, a couple times as a kid, pretty regularly as an adult. Directed my background is in theater and English, directed some Disney shows, and then the honors program at Robert Morris University in Pittsburgh, which is where I teach, asked if I wouldn't be interested in teaching a course, any specialty that I would like, although they suggested Disney. I told them that Disney was way too big a topic. We needed to focus a little bit, and asked if I couldn't focus just on Disney World. And that's what they've done. And I've taught it, I think, 5 or 6 times now.
Okay. And that's, as I said, we first met because of the academic society. And in the 2021 symposium, you talked about the amount of engagement and how engaged people feel at Walt Disney World, and part of like kind of their engagement and the important principles of that. Could you just briefly recap that again for everybody?
Sure. Sort of my scholarly interest in Disney was partly teaching this class, and partly because of COVID and not being able to do any of my creative work. So I was like, all right, I need to focus on something else. And because I have a theater background, when my family goes, we like to sort of imagine that we are in the places that Disney wants us to pretend to be. And I wondered if we were weird, or if other people wanted to buy in that way. So I did a large survey where I asked people how immersed they felt in different attractions. I focused just on the Magic Kingdom, and then what elements either added to or detracted from that immersion in the experience. And the takeaway seemed to be that it was ultimately not the attractions themselves, as wonderful as they are, but it was the cast members that made the difference, both in helping them be immersed in the experience and in taking them away from the experience if the cast members were distracted.
So do you think that on that topic, and see, we already, I sent a list of things to talk about, and we're already off of that list. But how much training do you think goes into being a cast member to make sure people are immersed in the environment? Do you think there's training for that? And then also, like, I guess that question, can that be taught? Or is that also like, does it kind of have to be inherent in a person's makeup to be able to be really, really good in that position?
And it's interesting because it was one of the questions that I got was someone from an HR perspective that said, how do we hire people that can do this? And my suggestion was ask them to tell you a story. I know that Disney has cut the amount of their traditions casting, which used to span several days, and I think now is down to 2, because they're just trying to get people through and out and working, I think. But I know I talked to a bartender. Actually, I talked to a bartender at Space 220, but we were talking about OGAs because he also bartends there. And he did say the people that are working in the Batu area, so just those, have a full day of training where they have to come up with a backstory. And he said he's not at all creative, but they were very helpful. And here's what you can pull from your own life and how it might connect to your life in Star Wars land. So I know at least in some areas they are getting that kind of create a character, be immersed, specifically in that area at least.
Okay. And you also do Disney musicals in the schools. Again, for people who haven't seen the first or listened to the first time we talked, give a brief recap of that one, please.
Sure. This is a great thing that Disney does through their performance wing, which sort of encompasses, I think, the Broadway stuff, the cruise ship, but it offers grants to cities. So I'm in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh Cultural Trust has a grant from Disney to hire teaching artists like myself. So there'll be 2 artists that will go into an at-risk school and direct, choreograph, music direct, stage manage a Disney junior musical. So the school I'm working with now is 3rd grade through 6th grade. That's a tiny part of what we're supposed to do. The big part of what we're supposed to do is train teachers at that school to do this on their own next year and the year after, so that there's a Disney musicals program established in that school. The first year, Disney gives them us and all of their materials and the rights and help with raising money. The second year, they give them half off of the script rentals and purchases and the royalties. The third year, they give them like 25% off. And hopefully after that, the program is off and running and making its own money and able to continue. It's really exciting because I work with theater kids at the college level, and sometimes it's not till college that weird theater kids find their people. And I love the idea that through this program, you can be in 3rd or 4th grade and find out, oh, no, this is what I want to do for fun. Whether or not, it doesn't have to be what they want to do for a living, but this is a place where I feel at home, where my, my ability to do funny voices is not a distraction, but a great thing. So it's a really exciting program, and it's a national program. So in Pittsburgh, we're on our 3rd year, but knock on wood, the first year it all goes to fruition because we started in 2020 and things sort of got shot down. And then we did little workshops and virtual workshops the last couple of years. And this is the first year we've been able to go back completely live in the classroom with the kids.
Okay, awesome. So then the next on for TEAAS, the symposium, that's a 1-day symposium that meets the last Friday of IAAPA in Orlando. And I looked at the program beforehand. I looked at some of the things afterwards. There were some really interesting talks and posters. And so what were some things you took away from that? What were some of the interesting finds from that symposium?
Well, Len Testa was the keynote speaker. And I've been lucky enough, I met Len when he was just starting his touring plans. In fact, in 2002, 2003, I went down to Disney with a stopwatch and sent him times. And he's been generous enough to come speak to my class, but we've never met in person. So it was really exciting to hear him talk. And his talk was largely about why education should care about themed experiences and attractions, and why themed attractions and experiences should care about education. And I thought that was really exciting and interesting, the impact that each can have on the other. there was a presentation on storytelling in cues,
Okay.
which kind of led down a rabbit hole in question and answer about something that I've still been thinking about, as to whether or not people with guest assistance passes who sometimes bypass those cues are missing out on story elements, and what can be done to make sure that people get the full story if they need to use a guest assistance pass. And if they get the full story, if they are, if they're deaf, what is happening in those lines. So my daughter and I spent, after that presentation, we were in Universal for a couple of days and spent a lot of times talking about, okay, what are we getting or not getting, depending on where we stand in line.
Well, and that's a really interesting one, that especially with not just for people who have special or need special assistance, or but also with like the overabundance and all of the focus being on things like Fast Pass and Lightning Lane and Genie Plus and all these access to like let you skip the line.
Right.
What do you get all of those elements? When we did a few years ago in 2019, we went to, when we were in Hollywood Studios, that was like 2 weeks after Galaxy's Edge opened. So I was really afraid that it was going to be really, really busy. But that's also when, if you remember, Disney opened Hollywood Studios 3 hours early, and they opened all parks an hour early for people staying on property. So it worked out really well for us. But I remember my father-in-law and I went on Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run, but we did the single rider line because we didn't want to stay. It was like a 2-hour line.
Sure.
So we did the single riders line. And so when we walked in there, we walked basically straight on to the Millennium Falcon. And so we got to see the Sabak table, and we got to see all of this. And I got to sit at the table, take pictures and all of that. And November 2021 is the next time when we went back, and we stood in line, and there's a lot more that you see in line, but also you're standing in line for an hour and a half or 2 hours. And so, from a consumer's perspective, where's the trade-off?
Right.
Like, do people want all of that story with the understanding that they're going to be standing there, and frankly, you're going to be really consuming that story for a long time, because you're going to be looking at the same thing for 15 minutes before you move at all, or like, is there a sped up way to get kind of the background of that? Or even if you miss some, does that matter, because now you're on the attraction faster?
Exactly.
That's a really interesting one, like to think about. What were some other things that happened?
I brought a student with me. I was teaching Disney class in the fall.
Okay.
So in the summer, I reached out to the kids already registered for that and said, look, I know you don't want to think about class yet. However, here's what your ultimate assignment will be. If you want to jump on this now, you could, maybe be accepted to show some of your research, because the year I was there before, it was all grad student research, but some of my undergrads are doing that level of work. And I did have one student who took me up on it and had her research accepted. And she was doing research into seizures and strobing lights at Disney. Okay. Now, I have a student who actually took my Disney class a couple of years ago, who now works in cybersecurity at Disney. So she's a theater kid with the cybersecurity major, which is a really interesting combination. And she let us know that there is no strobing light at Disney technically fast enough to have a seizure from. Okay. There's some sort of limitation, and they get on that, but not over it. It reminds me of, we'll build the castle to within 6 inches of when we have to put a light on the top. So technically there shouldn't be a connection, but my student was able to go into and look at the reports of seizure activity, and also talk about migraines, because interestingly enough, that August, I took a trip with my daughter and a friend of hers who gets migraine from flashing lights. So we'd already looked into every attraction that
Yeah.
flashes a light and when she should close her eyes. So technically there might not be a connection, but there sure seemed to be,
Yeah.
judging from what my student found, in terms of seizures or other illness from
Yeah.
flashing light. So
Yeah.
it was a good piece of research.
Okay. How did people react to our poster? Did you get a lot of conversation about it?
You know, I had a really good talk with someone who wanted to know if there was a way we could like co-teach across two universities together. And I said, I don't know, but you know, we could at least, I visit your classroom this way. I would love to have you come next time I teach it and visit my classroom and do some
Yeah.
crossover that way.
Yeah. And, you know, I actually, I have an idea. We'll talk off recording, and can have many more conversations offline about it. Something to do that maybe both classes would benefit from, students from both classes would benefit from doing stuff. So then tell us what IAAPA is, because there's a lot of people like who don't know what IAAPA is, and it is the largest conference of its kind, convention of its kind, and it's held every November in Orlando, Florida. So can you tell us what that is and then kind of walk us through several
Sure.
other things?
I will say, after attending it, I still do not know what those letters stand for. I could not find those letters anywhere. Do you
So
have it?
I actually looked it up because I wanted to be sure I knew what it is. It is the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions.
Okay, well, that makes sense. But yeah, it was funny. It was always just the letters and, oh, you know what that means.
Yeah.
I don't. So year before last, I'd gone just to the academic conference the one day and talked to several people who were like, where were you all week? I thought, I don't work in that industry. Like, you need to do the whole thing. So I thought, okay. And generously, IAAPA offered an education price for
Okay.
attending the conference, which is otherwise a very expensive conference, and a student price. So I brought my daughter with me. And I would say it took us on and off 3 days just to go through the trade floor.
Mhm.
So much stuff happening, overwhelming. We went to a number of, there's sort of an education wing. We went to a number of talks, including a wonderful one from Disney. I went to a number of them on guest recovery because I'm very interested in how other places compared to Disney. I would say after being there a day, Jonna and I walked away with like a dozen career thoughts. My daughter's in college currently, a dozen places like, oh, wow, people do that for a living. That's really neat. Lots of people on the trade floor, even when I said, I'm not in a position to buy things from you, but I would love to talk to you, were certainly willing to talk to me about their business and what they offer. And I mean, it's everything from people that sell the plush toys that go in claw machines to ride engineers to new virtual reality kind of attractions to inflatables to $13,000 cotton candy machines that will make a fancy shaped cotton candy for your guests, and different fog scents, which I'm actually going to use in a show that's coming up, and lots of insurance places, which I hadn't really thought about, but yeah, of course, there's lots of insurance. It was really exciting. And people were very friendly and made a lot of interesting connections.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend it to students, especially students who may not know exactly what's coming next for them career-wise.
Yeah. Do you have plans to go back?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's I wanted to make TEAAS this year. We talked about that. And just couldn't make it work toward the end of it. That is kind of a goal or a plan in the future, is to go down and go to IAAPA a day or two, and then go to the symposium. But also, you know, when I'm there, I'm spending a lot of times at the parks. So have to work that in between
Yeah, we
those.
went a couple of days early to do a couple days at Disney. One day, because they send you like a 600-page virtual document of what's happening at IAAPA. There was one evening that was nothing, so we went to a Christmas party.
Okay.
And my student that went with me and her mom met us at the Christmas party, and then we stayed a couple of days after the festival to do a couple of days at Universal. So we squeezed in some park time in and around the conference.
Yeah. So this over the last year and a half, we talked actually January 2022. So this would be a year about. You have been back to the parks a couple times, and I haven't been since November 2021 now. In the times that you've gone back in 2022, what are some of the things that you have noticed that have either are coming back, things are like still opening back up, things are still being added, and then also, you know, are there some improvements you've noticed? Are there some things that maybe they need to make changes of, which are some announcements that they have made, I know. But what are some of the things you've taken away from your previous visits?
Yeah, I went a lot last year. I had an annual pass, which was the perfect excuse to go a lot. I did not renew it this year because I wasn't sure how often I'd be down. We'll start with, I was disappointed first. I was disappointed that a year later, Epcot is still construction wall land. There's still like a lot of, I'm used to being in the park and knowing where I need to go.
Yeah.
And I'm having to look at signs and figure out what roundabout way do I need to go to get from one place to another. Not all of the countries in World Showcase have their ambassadors back. They're starting to. Not all of the countries in World Showcase are completely, and maybe it's a staffing thing, are completely open, like stores are still closed. I don't think there's anything in the back of Morocco that's open right now. You can walk around back there, but there's no stores. And the restaurant in the back has closed. Hopefully that's not an ongoing close. But Guardians of the Galaxy, so cool, really wonderful. Missed out, just there was a backstage tour available through IAAPA that I was like, this is ridiculously expensive and I'm still going to try to get it, but it's sold out like that.
Yeah.
Because I was the first couple of times I ride an attraction, I'm just experiencing it. And then I get very like, how are they doing this? How is this happening? And there's things I still haven't figured out there. I find the cast members to be as wonderful as always.
Okay.
I try to use that cast compliment thing on the app a lot. Unfortunately, you can't be really specific. I mean, what I liked about it before is you could say, here's what they did and why they were great. And now it's just sort of, but that's okay. I'll use that often.
Yeah.
This last trip in November, we were able to, since it was just my daughter and I, we're more patient than when there's a crowd. So we waited the 90 minutes to be able to go up and sit at the bar at Space 220, and it was absolutely worth the wait. We were lucky enough to be able to get into Oga's Cantina at a last minute, at like 9:45 at night. Also pretty cool, not quite as cool as Space 220. So I think, despite a lot of grumpy people, I think, post-COVID about what they expect from Disney, I still think it's a wonderful place that just needs to, let's get those construction walls down, get Tron opened.
The Space 220 is that's one restaurant it opened shortly before we went, and it was before they were really doing a lot of walk up and you could wait. Everything had to be reservation then, and
it's hard to get and expensive.
Yeah, and
you want to spend $55 for lunch per person.
That that was one, we didn't get to do it, but that was one, and still is one restaurant that I'll pay to do, because the boys are really into that, and just the concept of it is so neat anyway.
It was really, I mean, part of, I think what I liked about it so much is we were sitting at the bar, and the bartender was really gregarious and like I had a lot of questions just about Disney and working for Disney. And he was very excited. He had been on the committee that had made the new decisions about cast members being able to choose what costume they want to wear.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to wear a skirt? Do you want to wear pants? And so that was interesting to talk to him about that. But the experience, and we just ate little appetizers, so good.
Yeah.
Food was good. Drinks were fun. Yeah, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, very cool.
If you've got littles, you might not want to sit on the ground for 90 minutes because they won't text you. If you want to wait,
okay,
sit and wait. At least one person does. So you could tag team an adult sitting and waiting, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. When I tried to do that, they wouldn't even do that. It was all reserved. I walked up and even asked, and they said, no, if you don't have a reservation, there's no chance of doing it, because that was, again, I don't know, 3 or 4 months that it had been open, if that.
It's worth going. It's worth going. I think it was fun.
So another thing that there's really 2 more big questions I have. Everybody by now knows, November 2022, there was a change in leadership from the new Bob to the old Bob, which is now the new Bob, and the new Bob is now the old Bob. Bob Iger came back. And since then, as soon as the announcement was made, it was like you could almost feel this weight coming off of Disney fans, and this audible cheer coming from like the Disney fan community, of things that they wanted changed, things that people had blamed on Chapek, and things that I think there were some missteps along the way, but I also think there were some things that were going to happen because of the pandemic and because of other things and just external factors that happened. But what is your impression first of the change in leadership and what it means for the company as a whole and for Disney fans around the world?
So I'm in an English department. I used to be in a communication department. And I think hopefully what Disney's learned is they really need a communicator in that spot, because I think that was part of Chapek's problem, is he didn't give a good speech. Mm-hmm. People didn't perceive him as approachable. Like Iger was in the parks the other day, and I saw all of these pictures of people like, look who I saw. So clearly he was willing to stop and take pictures with people who recognized him. I think the jubilation, I was going to say the jubilation was short-lived. I think people are still happy, but I think they thought Magical Express is coming back. We're going to have dining plans tomorrow, and the park passes are going away, and everything will be back. And there were a few people saying now that, that there are bigger fish to fry. Those are the things important to you as someone goes to the park, but there's a whole company that needs to be adjusted. But I do think he's done a good job of throwing a few bones. The annual pass holders don't need park passes after a certain time. The dining plan isn't back, but they have that promotion out where you can get a dining card if you put in if you're staying for so many days, you have a package. So I think he's being smart. He's getting his face out there. He's throwing us some bones enough to make people go, okay, all right. I mean, I get the Magical Express, but we have this discount. And the cast members on the ground seem to be happier about that change from the folks that I know that I talked to about it.
Well, and what was really interesting to me is I've been lucky enough to teach this class each semester for the last 3 or 4 years now. And the spring 2021 semester was a very interesting semester in this class, because that was, there were a number of things that were happening earlier in the semester. But then, about March is when Disney and the Florida legislature got into everything there. And so the rest of the semester, that was actually kind of February, I guess. But from that point on in the semester, that kind of ate up a lot of the news cycle.
Mhm.
And was very, very interesting. The thing that was very interesting, or most interesting to me, is not necessarily, or I should say, the thing that was most interesting to me was the internal communication within Disney. That you at that moment had Pixar, employees from Pixar, and then Pixar making an official statement. And you had Marvel making a statement, Lucasfilm making a statement. And so it was very interesting to me that it seemed like there wasn't a lot of communication internally. Because to be successful in a company, I think most people think you need to keep your customers happy, and you need to keep your cast members or employees happy. And it seemed like the at that point, the cast members or the employees in there in different sections of the company, that there was a lot of unhappiness at that point. And so it feels like, I don't, the impression I get now is that maybe this is somebody who cast members feel, they'll bring back the things that were happening before, with the feedback and all of these things. That was my biggest impression from all of that, and from all of like the internal struggle within the Walt Disney Company. How do you, now that he's been back 2 months, and it's going to take a lot longer than that, and he's only supposed to be with the company 2 years. We'll see if that's extended. And a large part of that is supposed to be getting stock prices back to where they were, and the other large part is finding a successor who is going to work this time. The
Right.
succession plan didn't work last time. Where does Parks, I mean, what role do you think Parks will play in kind of the focus of a new leadership? I mean, if it's only 2 years, there's not really a lot of time to do
Right.
things except for make little changes here and there, right?
Well, and they need, if they're looking at a successor, they need somebody that's got experience in the film part, somebody that's got experience in the parks, somebody that's got experience in Disney Plus seemed to be really where Chapek was putting all of his marbles, and that has not been, I guess, financially successful yet. It's successful in my living room, but
Yeah. Well, and I will say they went, before they launched that, they said 2024 was the target date for being profitable. Now, here in a few weeks, we'll learn how close they are to attaining that by the end of 2024, by 2024. But yeah, there's been this shift that now everybody thinks streaming needs to be profitable right now, even though like the plans were kind of laid out for everybody that, Netflix wasn't profitable for a very long time. Disney Plus won't be either.
right.
But back to the parks of what emphasis do you think will be placed on the parks for in this leadership?
I think that if they're concerned about their fans, the parks need to be important. Because that's where there are definitely people that are like fans of Disney movies and have Disney Plus or are sports fans, I guess, and watch ABC. But I think the hardcore Disney fans are going to the parks. And it might be not like us crazy regularly, but and from what I can tell, it's the park fans that are loud about it, and need to be placated a little. I had really interesting conversations in my class this fall, where one of them said, you know, I'm a fan of a lot of things, but Disney fans seem to really be also involved in the like business, questioning the business of Disney. And I said, wait, yeah. And I'm not sure how much that is in other fandoms.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, there's not a lot of other fandoms where people even know who the CEO is.
right.
But something like Disney, because it's, you know, because of its foundation and family entertainment and all of this, and your people like they, you know, they call the CEO by their first name, and they call Josh D'Amoro by, you know, they know who he is, and like, so it is very, it's a different atmosphere than a lot of other Fortune 500 companies, a lot of other entertainment companies. So yeah, it is very different. So yeah, that's interesting that you had those conversations as well. So there are a few things that have been announced in the Disney parks. What are some things that, I guess, in 2023, what do you think needs to happen to point toward success or progress in the Disney parks?
I think the last big announcement we got was, whoopee, we're getting a Hatbox Ghost at the Haunted Mansion. And then there was a whole blue sky. What if we had a villains area? What if we had a this? And that was great. But I don't see, and you know, Tron is finally opening, and the after 4 years, the railroad is running again. But they need some less blue sky and some more, this is what's happening next. Because I mean, Tron is going to be awesome. Guardians of the Galaxy is great, but it doesn't compare to, and I know this is our next piece of conversation, it doesn't compare to what other companies are saying is coming next. And the revamp of Epcot will be great, but we're looking at walls still after a year. And I just feel like, oh, I know I'm feeling like, what's taking so long?
Yeah.
The Moana thing is a walkthrough with water, which sounds cool, but how is it taking years to be put in?
Yeah. And, you know, maybe some of that goes back to that communicator, that there are many things that happen within a company that aren't communicated to their fans and their consumers and shouldn't be communicated. But then possibly it's, you know, you could alleviate some of these issues or some of this angst with fans with different types of communication, different types of updates or things like that. Because what it feels like now, or what I should say, in talking with people, the impression I get is we're kind of in this era where there's a lot of, hey, wouldn't this be cool ideas? Or we're going to do this. So not necessarily promises that we're going to do it, but they don't end up coming to fruition. Right. Where, you know, I think people are ready to see, okay, we need to see this come to fruition. We need to see these things opening up. You know, 2022 saw the opening of Remy's Adventure, or that was 2021. 2022 saw the opening of Guardians of the Galaxy. You know, what are some things that are going to happen in 2023, 2024 and beyond, that is going to be able to keep up with competition?
Right. And a new DVC building at Polynesian isn't going to cut it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's great, but
yeah. So you mentioned it. The last thing that I have before the rapid questions is about Universal. And within, you know, when Universal announced Epic Adventure, which is their new or I'm sorry, Epic Universe, which is their new park they're building in Orlando. That spurred a lot of Disney fans bringing up the mythical fifth gate again. You know, is Disney ever going to build a fifth gate? I even read last week that there are just maybe like a permit or something filed for actually potentially 2 more spaces within the Walt Disney World area that could be used for a theme park. So, you know, they still keep going.
Right.
The kind of the wish list keeps going. But then last week, Universal also announced they're building 2 smaller theme parks, not in Orlando or Southern California, but one in Las Vegas that focuses on their horror franchises, and one in Frisco, Texas, which is a very fast growing area outside in the Dallas Metroplex, I should say Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex, that's focusing on family entertainment and their younger fans, like some of their DreamWorks. And so what do you make of this news? And do you think Disney should be a little bit worried that they're falling behind in building and it opening things? And will that ultimately hurt attendance for the Walt Disney parks?
And I know anecdotally, a lot of DVC members are staying in their DVC places and going to Universal.
Okay.
Because it's perceived as needing less planning.
Yeah.
You don't need park reservations, you don't have to deal with Genie Plus, it's just easier. I hadn't been to Universal since 1997. There's not much to say in there since 1977, but this year Jana and I went after IAAPA. I have a student that works there, and she said, you know, if you're gonna, you need to come check us out. It was lovely. I have a student that's getting married in Florida. I'm officiating a wedding at Disney in August, and
Very cool.
I said to my family, we have 2 days. Like the bachelorette party is at Epcot. After the wedding at 9 o'clock in the morning, we're going to Magic Kingdom. Do we want to stay at Disney a couple of more days, or do we want to go to Universal? And we still haven't decided. Jana, who had been to Universal, said 2 more days at Disney. My husband and my son, who haven't been to Universal, said we want to check out Universal. And I guess my feeling about Universal was awesome roller coasters. And all of the other rides seem to be sort of the same ride. I was in a big ride vehicle. I had glasses. I was moved around to another screen and saw something, and then moved around to another screen and saw something. Not all of them. The Hagrid's, who was awesome.
Yeah.
So I guess my question about Epic Universe will be, are you doing something new? And maybe, and I may be a Disney apologist, this is why Universal pumps out a lot more things quickly than Disney does, because it's a reskin of the same attraction, which I think Disney may do from park to park, but not within a park. You're not going to go, this is the same attraction that I was just on. Still, the resorts are lovely and cheaper. A deluxe Universal is going to be way cheaper than a deluxe Disney. With a third park, fourth if you count the water park like they do, which they maybe shouldn't, but okay. It's for families with teens, especially that want to hit those roller coasters. It's going to be it's not going to be, oh, and then let's do a day or two at Universal. It may turn into, well, then maybe we can go to Epcot for a day after we finish our Universal vacation. I don't find it, thinking about immersion, I didn't find it nearly as immersive. Very often we'd get to the front of an attraction and I'd go, what's the story here?
Yeah.
And we go, I don't know, but it's a roller coaster. So cool. I think there's dinosaurs loose. I don't know. All right, let's just ride it. So for me as a storyteller, it can't compete. But for me as a person spending their vacation dollars, it's going to be more competitive.
Yeah.
Because it's easier. And I would really, I mean, I haven't been to Vegas in years, but the Halloween Horror Nights 12 months out of the year sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And,
Maybe
you know,
add to that.
I haven't been to Universal in a very long time. I think you said the last time you went was 97. I think maybe
97.
I might have gone in 91 or 92 when it first opened. I mean, it opened, I think, in 89, or 90 is when it opened, I believe. And we were there shortly after that. And I can't remember if I've been back, maybe once. I remember, like, the things that I remember from it. I remember being immersed in, like, this is how long it's been since I've been there. These things aren't there anymore. But the King Kong ride, I remember that. Confrontation, the Jaws ride. I really liked the Jaws ride. I know the ET ride is still there. That was my favorite. And you know, but I haven't been since the what is it, Islands of Adventure has opened. I would like to see especially the Jurassic World section or Jurassic Park section. And I think as the boys get older, in a few years, we'll probably want to see a lot of the Harry Potter stuff. And I think those areas are pretty well, I've heard, are pretty well immersive.
The Harry Potter areas are the only downside is they're so true to J.K. Rowling's ideas that they're cramped.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Diagon Alley is an alley and it's crowded.
Do you know there's the story goes that Disney and Universal were bidding over who was going to be able to build that property. And J.K. Rowling went with Universal for that reason, because Disney would want it wide open. They would want doors open to allow crowd flow. And she wanted it to be as immersive and true to her story as possible. And Universal was going to do that. So that's why she went with Universal. That's how the story goes, at least.
Yeah. And the door thing is interesting because there are doors that are decorative and not real doors. And then there's doors that really go into stores. And there was a lot of, wait, do I go in here?
Yeah.
And then the stores were, and we were not there, I don't think. I mean, it was November. It's not an exceptionally crowded time. It was tight. Yeah. It was tight. There were definitely times that I was like, okay, we need to go somewhere where where nobody's gonna touch me.
Yeah.
For a minute here, because it's crowded.
So,
but it looks really cool.
Yeah. And you know, I think I think the future of, I mean, Disney and Universal and Disney and Comcast have been competitors for such a long time. I mean, going back to when Disneyland was being built because Walt Disney saw what Universal City was doing with their studios tours. And then when Disneyland's built, Universal adds on to their tours, and just going back and forth. And then, you know, during the Michael Eisner era, when Universal announces they're building a park in Florida. And so MGM opens literally, I think, months or a year before Universal Studios Orlando or Universal Studios Florida. They've always been competitors that I think there's just this expectation that when one does something, the other is going to do something. And I find that really interesting because it's ultimately better for the fans. If you are a fan of themed entertainment and theme parks, it's better when competition is at an all-time high, because then companies are really trying to compete for your dollars. And so that's ultimately a good thing. So before we do our rapid questions, is there anything that I may have missed? Anything you wanted to add to any of the topics?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Then I just put together a few rapid questions dealing with the parks, and they're really kind of like in 2023 within the Disney parks. What are you most looking forward to?
Well, I guess Tron, because
Okay.
it's the thing I haven't ridden yet. Although I'm also looking forward to getting back on that railroad train.
Hmm.
And oddly, my son just said, "Hey, the next time we go to Magic Kingdom, can we go to Tom Sawyer Island? I don't think we've done that since I was a little kid."
Yeah.
And I said, "No, we sure haven't." But yeah, if that's, so don't be too disappointed. You were real excited as a little kid. As an adult, it's sort of like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
there's nothing over here. But
The caves are the same size as they were when you were a kid, but you're now bigger, so they may not be as interesting anymore. What is, if you could say 2 or 3 things that the company needed to do to improve the parks, attraction wise, or not necessarily, we'll talk about customer experience and immersion in just a little bit, but if 2 or 3 things the company could do to improve the parks in the short term, what do you think they would be?
they need to bring back their entertainment cast members. They need
Okay.
to bring back Street Atmosphere at Hollywood Studios. They need to bring back something, the Citizens of Main Street and Magic Kingdom. Those are the places where Disney can win, if it's a question of win, over Universal. Those, I just stumbled into something and this is awesome and someone's talking to me. That would be my first plead to Disney parks, is bring back those performers.
Okay. And then about specific to immersion, I know you just mentioned the performers, but what are 2 or 3 things that the company could do to improve immersion at their parks that would ultimately improve the customer experience, hopefully leading to retention?
Well, I would say, yeah, it would be nice for them to go back to more training. I think that there are people, college program kids especially, that like, this is a dream year or semester that I'm going to be a Disney cast member. And I think, and it probably has something to do with salaries as well,
Mhm.
that the better we can treat those frontline cast members, the better the experience is going to be for the guests. I met some great cast members this last trip, just like working in the Candy Cauldron at Disney Springs and working in the Katie, working in the Sunshine Seasons in the Land Pavilion. Some very chatty, friendly, wonderful cast members, the bartender at Space 220. And they need to make sure those people are taken care of, because that's
Yeah.
where the magic is.
Okay. All right.
You can tell I'm a union member.
What's that?
I said, you can tell I'm a union member, but I have the right to treat your workers well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
No problem. Happy to. I love talking about Disney.
Yeah, and like I said, there's so many ideas of things that we can do. I think we could possibly do between our classes and for future, possibly even symposiums or presentations or things like that, that we'll talk offline about. But thank you so much for doing
You're
this.
very welcome.
What is the best way for people to contact you if they have questions or want to continue
Oh,
conversations?
sure. Probably by email. It's Lefebvre, my last name, Lefeb like boy, V like Victor, RE at RMU, Robert Morris University.edu.
Okay. All right. And thank you so much for this, and have a
You're
great rest of
welcome.
your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.